We live in a world saturated with information, interconnected like never before. Yet amidst this constant flow of data, accountability is eroding. From government halls to daily interactions, owning our actions is fading. This decline has profound implications for society. Think about recent news cycles often involving blame shifting, politicians deflecting responsibility, corporations denying culpability. Even in personal lives, finger-pointing is common. Avoiding accountability seems easier than owning up. This signifies a deeper issue, a crack in the foundation of trust. Accountability is the bedrock of integrity and positive change. Shying away from it erodes trust and progress. The consequences are far-reaching, impacting every aspect of our lives. Trust, that invisible yet essential bond, is the lifeblood of any healthy relationship, community, or society. It is built on honesty, transparency, and accountability. When responsibility is neglected, trust erodes, leaving suspicion and doubt. This erosion is evident in the rising tide of skepticism towards institutions and authority figures. Public trust in government, media, and corporations has plummeted. In personal lives, avoiding accountability can poison relationships. This decline in trust has far-reaching consequences. It creates fear and uncertainty, stifling innovation and cooperation. Rebuilding trust requires prioritizing accountability and transparency. Engage in difficult conversations and hold each other responsible. This is essential to reverse distrust and create a thriving society. The decline of accountability is a collective crisis, affecting all levels of society. It permeates from personal interactions to the highest echelons of power. This avoidance of responsibility is a symptom of deeper systemic and cultural shifts. Social media, while connecting us, has contributed to this crisis. Algorithms reward outrage and polarization, creating echo chambers. Anonymity online emboldens irresponsible behavior. Emphasis on individualism fosters a culture of self-preservation. Admitting fault is seen as a threat to public personas. Disillusionment with institutions breeds cynicism and apathy. Authority figures failing to take responsibility justifies our own avoidance. This crisis demands a collective response to rebuild a culture of accountability. The consequences of avoiding accountability are profound. It erodes trust, breeds resentment, and prevents growth. In the workplace, it leads to low morale and blame shifting. Societally, it undermines institutions and fuels corruption. The price is steep: broken relationships and missed opportunities. Embracing accountability can build a just and fulfilling future. Our modern world, for all its advancements, seems to have developed an aversion to accountability. We live in a culture increasingly defined by deflection, where responsibility is treated like a hot potato. This aversion is pervasive, seeping into our everyday interactions and political discourse. Consider the language we use. We speak of mistakes were made rather than acknowledging who made them. We talk of unforeseen circumstances instead of owning up to our lack of foresight. This linguistic dance has become so ingrained that it often goes unnoticed. Underlying the culture of deflection is a potent cocktail of fear. We fear judgment, the sting of criticism, and the potential damage to our carefully curated reputations. In a world increasingly obsessed with image and personal branding, admitting fault can feel like a high-stakes gamble, a threat to our social standing, and even our sense of self-worth. This fear is amplified by the unforgiving nature of the digital age. Every misstep, every poorly worded comment, has the potential to be amplified and immortalized online, leaving us feeling perpetually vulnerable to public shaming and reputational damage. In this environment, is it any wonder that the instinct to deflect and avoid responsibility has become so deeply ingrained? Moreover, the fear of consequences extends beyond the digital realm. In a world where lawsuits are commonplace and where even minor infractions can have significant repercussions, the stakes of taking responsibility can feel incredibly high. This fear-driven calculus can lead individuals and institutions alike to prioritize self-preservation over accountability, further perpetuating a cycle of blame shifting and avoidance. This climate of fear is not conducive to fostering a culture of accountability. When individuals feel unsafe to admit mistakes, to learn from their failures, and to engage in open and honest dialogue, growth becomes stunted, innovation is stifled, and the potential for positive change is severely limited. To break free from this fear-driven cycle, we must create environments where accountability is not seen as a threat, but rather as an opportunity for growth, learning, and genuine progress. The digital age, while connecting us in unprecedented ways, has also contributed to the decline of accountability in ways we are only beginning to understand. Social media platforms, with their algorithms designed to maximize engagement, often create echo chambers where our existing biases are reinforced and dissenting voices are silenced or drowned out. In these echo chambers, accountability becomes a matter of perspective, a weapon to be wielded against those we disagree with while conveniently overlooking our own shortcomings. The anonymity afforded by the internet can further embolden individuals to engage in irresponsible behavior, from cyberbullying to the spread of misinformation without fear of real-world consequences. Furthermore, the constant barrage of information, much of it unverified or deliberately misleading, can create a sense of information overload and fatigue, making it difficult to discern truth from falsehood and to hold individuals and institutions accountable for their actions. In this environment of information saturation, it becomes easier to disengage, to become cynical, and to accept a lower standard of accountability from ourselves and others. To counteract the negative impact of the digital echo chamber, we must develop critical thinking skills, engage in respectful dialogue with those who hold different viewpoints, and demand greater transparency and accountability from social media platforms themselves. Only by fostering a digital environment that values truth, nuance, and responsible discourse can we hope to reverse the erosion of accountability in the digital age. At its core, the avoidance of accountability is often rooted in a deeply human instinct: self-preservation. We are wired to protect ourselves, our egos, and our sense of self-worth. Admitting fault, acknowledging mistakes, and taking responsibility for our actions can feel like a direct threat to these core aspects of our identity. To shield ourselves from this perceived threat, we engage in a variety of psychological defense mechanisms. We rationalize our behavior, minimize the impact of our actions, or shift blame onto others. We may even convince ourselves that we were victims of circumstance, powerless to have acted differently. These defense mechanisms, while understandable, ultimately prevent us from confronting our mistakes, learning from them, and growing as individuals. Moreover, our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Accountability, with its connotations of punishment, guilt, and social disapproval, falls squarely into the pain category. It is therefore unsurprising that we often go to great lengths to avoid it, even when doing so ultimately harms us in the long run. To overcome these deeply ingrained psychological barriers, we must cultivate self-compassion and recognize that making mistakes is an inherent part of being human. We must create environments where vulnerability is valued, where individuals feel safe to admit their shortcomings without fear of judgment or retribution. By shifting our perspective on accountability from a source of shame to an opportunity for growth, we can begin to dismantle the psychological barriers that prevent us from embracing it fully. Imagine a bridge held together not by steel and concrete, but by invisible strands of trust. Each act of accountability strengthens these strands, weaving a resilient structure. Conversely, blame-shifting frays these vital connections. This erosion of trust is often subtle at first. Over time, the cracks in the foundation widen. In personal relationships, this can manifest as resentment. In professional settings, the impact is equally damaging. A lack of accountability breeds mistrust among colleagues. Teamwork suffers as individuals hesitate to collaborate. The free flow of ideas and information is stifled. Once trust is eroded, it is exceedingly difficult to rebuild. It requires a conscious and consistent effort from all parties involved. Without this foundation of trust, relationships are built on shaky ground. Open, honest communication is the lifeblood of any healthy relationship. However, when accountability declines, communication suffers. The fear of judgment and reluctance to own up to mistakes create barriers. In personal relationships, this can lead to avoidance, passive aggression, or bottled-up resentment. Partners may avoid difficult conversations, fearing blame. This cycle of misunderstanding and emotional distance leaves both parties feeling unheard. In the workplace, poor communication leads to a culture of silence. Individuals may hesitate to speak up about problems or share dissenting opinions. This stifles growth and innovation. To foster accountability, prioritize open, honest communication. Create safe spaces for individuals to speak their minds without fear. Engage in difficult conversations with empathy and a commitment to finding solutions. Accountability is about creating a framework for growth and improvement. When embraced, it turns mistakes into learning opportunities. Without accountability, growth and innovation decline. In personal relationships, lack of accountability leads to stagnation. Without acknowledging shortcomings, individuals and couples can't evolve. The relationship becomes stagnant, lacking dynamism and growth. In the workplace, lack of accountability stifles creativity. Fear of repercussions prevents risk-taking and innovation. This leads to complacency and mediocrity. Embrace accountability as a catalyst for progress. Create environments where individuals feel safe to experiment and learn. Shift the mindset to view accountability as an opportunity for improvement. Foster a culture of continuous growth and collective advancement. Declining accountability fosters toxic environments. In personal relationships, it leads to blame shifting, manipulation, or emotional abuse. Individuals may refuse to acknowledge their role in conflicts. This creates a toxic dynamic with an imbalance of power. In the workplace, lack of accountability leads to fear, blame, and low morale. Employees hesitate to speak up, fearing scapegoating. Mistakes are ignored or covered up. This creates a toxic environment with undervalued and dissatisfied employees. Combat toxicity by cultivating a culture of accountability. Ensure clear communication and consistent enforcement of consequences. Address issues promptly and fairly. Foster empathy and understanding, recognizing that accountability is about creating a just and respectful environment. Leaders set the tone for organizational culture. Their behavior shapes values, norms, and expectations. If leaders avoid responsibility, it signals that accountability is not a priority. This creates a culture of self-preservation and mediocrity. Conversely, accountable leaders foster transparency and integrity. Employees model their behavior after accountable leaders. Leadership is about actions, not just words. Set clear expectations for accountability and provide regular feedback. Ensure fair and consistent consequences. Empower individuals to speak up and hold each other accountable. Actions speak louder than words in leadership and accountability. Hypocrisy undermines credibility and erodes trust. Imagine a CEO who preaches ownership but blames others for failures, or a manager who avoids difficult conversations despite valuing open communication. This disconnect between words and actions is damaging. Employees observe and model their leaders' behavior. Leading by example transforms organizational culture. Accountable leaders create a model for others to follow. This fosters psychological safety and encourages risk-taking. Support and guide individuals rather than blame or shame them. Creating a culture of accountability is an ongoing process. Leaders play a crucial role in shaping this culture. Start by establishing clear expectations and providing support. Define what accountability means within the organization. Communicate expected behaviors and consequences. Provide training and development opportunities. Foster open communication and a culture of feedback. Address issues promptly and fairly. View mistakes as opportunities for learning and growth. Implement solutions to prevent similar issues in the future. Responsible leadership impacts teams, organizations, and society. Leaders who prioritize accountability influence their industries and communities. Ethical business practices and transparency set high standards. Political leaders who prioritize open government inspire others. This ripple effect is crucial in today's interconnected world. Leaders recognize their responsibility to all stakeholders. They make ethical and sustainable decisions. Embrace accountability to create a just and equitable future. Lead by example to foster a culture of transparency and ownership. Blame shifting and avoiding accountability stem from the human psyche. Our minds construct narratives to protect our sense of self. This self-preservation instinct leads to avoidance. When confronted with mistakes, our egos go into defense mode. This is an unconscious response to shield ourselves from shame or guilt. Defense mechanisms manifest in various ways. Rationalization is a common defense mechanism. We invent explanations that absolve us of responsibility. These rationalizations provide a comforting illusion of justification. Projection is another common tactic. We attribute our flaws to others, externalizing blame. This protects our egos and provides a scapegoat. These defense mechanisms hinder growth and self-reflection. Embrace accountability to overcome these psychological barriers. Recognize and address defense mechanisms to foster genuine self-improvement. Our minds crave consistency between beliefs, values, and actions. Cognitive dissonance occurs when this harmony is disrupted. This discomfort drives us to restore internal consistency. Cognitive dissonance plays a role in avoiding accountability. Acknowledging mistakes creates a disconnect with our self-perception. To resolve this dissonance, we justify our behavior or shift blame. We minimize the significance of our actions. Selective memory helps us forget contradictory aspects. In extreme cases, we rewrite history to absolve ourselves. Cognitive dissonance leads to self-deception. This avoidance hinders growth and genuine self-reflection. Embrace accountability to overcome cognitive dissonance. Foster a mindset of learning and growth. The human need for control is deeply ingrained. We crave a sense of agency and mastery over our lives. This desire for control can blind us to our limitations. The illusion of control affects accountability. Acknowledging mistakes threatens our sense of agency. We might deny our role in negative outcomes. Blaming external factors maintains the illusion of control. This externalization of blame is comforting but misleading. The illusion of control is just that, an illusion. Embrace accountability to acknowledge our limitations. True empowerment lies in accepting responsibility. Use experiences to navigate life with greater wisdom and resilience. Blame is a seductive mistress. It whispers promises of absolution, offering a convenient scapegoat for our mistakes. Far more tempting to point the finger than to confront our own shortcomings. This seductive nature of blame creates a potent cocktail of avoidance. We relinquish agency, surrendering our power to learn and grow. Trapped in a cycle of victimhood, powerless to change our circumstances. Blame rarely leads to meaningful resolution or positive change. It perpetuates conflict, erodes trust, and creates negativity. Breaking free requires a conscious choice, a shift in perspective. Accountability is about empowerment, embracing growth, and seeking solutions. Building a culture of accountability begins with a shift in mindset at the individual level. It starts with each of us embracing personal responsibility, moving beyond making excuses, resisting the urge to blame external factors, asking, what role did I play? Taking ownership of our actions and their consequences. This shift is an act of courage. In this space, true growth occurs. Accountability cannot thrive in an environment of silence. We must cultivate open, honest communication at all levels, create safe spaces for speaking up and sharing perspectives. Open communication begins with active listening. Understand others' perspectives, even when they differ. Ask clarifying questions and approach disagreements with curiosity. Vulnerability fosters trust and psychological safety. Share experiences and admit mistakes to build trust. This encourages accountability and positive change. Accountability thrives in an environment where expectations are clearly defined, consistently communicated, and fairly enforced. When individuals and organizations lack a shared understanding of what is expected, when goals are ambiguous, or when consequences for upholding or violating expectations are inconsistent, accountability becomes elusive. It is in this ambiguity that blame shifting flourishes, as individuals can easily rationalize their actions or point to a lack of clarity as justification for their missteps. Establishing clear expectations begins with defining roles and responsibilities. Who is accountable for what? What are the specific goals and objectives? What are the timelines and deadlines? By clearly outlining these parameters, individuals understand their role within the larger system and can be held accountable for fulfilling their specific obligations. Once expectations are established, they must be communicated effectively. This involves more than simply disseminating information. It requires ongoing dialogue, feedback mechanisms, and opportunities for clarification. Individuals should feel comfortable asking questions, seeking guidance, and raising concerns without fear of being perceived as incompetent or insubordinate. Furthermore, establishing clear consequences is crucial for reinforcing accountability. These consequences should be both positive and negative, rewarding desired behaviors and addressing unacceptable actions. It is important that these consequences are applied consistently and fairly, regardless of an individual's position, tenure, or personal relationships. This consistency is essential for building trust and ensuring that accountability is not perceived as arbitrary or biased. Shifting from blame to learning fosters a culture of accountability. Traditionally, accountability meant punishment and identifying the guilty. This creates fear and defensiveness, hindering learning. A learning-oriented approach sees mistakes as growth opportunities. It values effort, persistence, and learning from setbacks. Leaders must model vulnerability and create a culture of open dialogue. In this environment, true accountability flourishes, leading to innovation and resilience. The decline of accountability might paint a bleak picture, but the power to reverse this trend rests in our collective hands. It is a choice, a conscious decision to reclaim responsibility for our actions, our words, and their impact on the world around us. This choice demands courage, humility, and a willingness to challenge the prevailing culture of blame and deflection. It requires us to be more mindful of our own tendencies to avoid responsibility, to cultivate empathy and understanding in our interactions with others, and to create environments where accountability is not a burden, but a shared commitment to growth and progress. The path to a more accountable society begins with each of us, in our homes, our workplaces, and our communities. By embracing personal responsibility, fostering open communication, and shifting from a blame-centric to a learning-oriented approach, we can begin to rebuild trust, restore integrity, and create a world where accountability is not a fading ideal, but a lived reality. The journey may be challenging, but the stakes are too high to ignore. The future we create, a future defined by trust, progress, and shared responsibility, depends on the choices we make today. Let us choose accountability, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that will inherit the world we leave behind.